the Tragically Hip's guitar god, Paul Langlois, found creative inspiration while backing up some of his old songs.
I think it helped me probably a lot, you know, to 27 years and being, you know, part of a songwriting collective.
When Paul Langlois took on a new creative challenge, he headed to the recording studio. Without the bandmates he's been playing with for decades.
I just had to shut myself out as if I were in my own little basement. And, quite different, but sort of a nice relief for me.
When Paul Langlois went to back up some of his songs, he accidentally made an album.
I think it was just gradually getting used to the idea, and so that's why it was a surprise.
That sort of accident can happen when you're the guitarist of the Tragically Hip and your band owns a recording studio.
I had a bunch of tapes at home, like old format tapes, and I thought, well, they're just gonna eventually deteriorate. So I should go into our studio, and then at least I wouldn't lose all these little ideas.
Those little ideas weren't even full songs, but Paul decided to finish them up over that weekend.
When I came out of that weekend, I had 5 or 6 pretty finished songs, and then I thought, you know, well, whatever, I'll sing it.
He added a few extra days over the following months, and his first solo album, Fix This Head, was born.
I got something that'll fix this head.
The record's a bit personal. It's not necessarily all about me, but it's just sort of a comment on the fact that none of us have a perfectly in tune sort of outlook on life, or, you know, mental, emotional balance, all that kind of stuff. Just thought it was a nice ring to it.
After decades of being a member of one of Canada's most successful bands, Paul thought it would have been more difficult to find his own voice.
I think it helped me probably a lot, you know, the 27 years and being, you know, part of a songwriting collective. You know, the experience certainly helped me find my own voice.
His voice may have changed for the album, but his longtime go-to guitars didn't. One of his staples is this mini humbucker loaded 1972 Gibson Les Paul Deluxe.
I probably got this in maybe 97. Bought it at a local store in Kingston. It ended up to be my main guitar, like definitely over the last 10 years. At the time, Robbie, the other guitar player, was playing Strats, and I was playing Tellys, but Les Paul, it was just a fuller sound, and I felt a little more attached to the rhythm section because it was kind of more low mid and a bit of a sort of a bigger, crunchier kind of sound. I always forget it's a sunburst. When I'm playing it, I always think of it as more of your tobacco burst, which is a little browner, less orange. I prefer those colors. This is a little bright and orange and sunny for me.
The finish and sound on his 1959 Gibson Les Paul Jr. certainly isn't sunny, given its vintage single P90 pickup.
I bought this in Bethesda, Maryland, and this had been painted brown, this lovely brown color. So it was $900 for the guitar and for the amp.
It's easy to see this guitar has been well loved since Paul got a hold of Paul Jr.
It was like about half that beat up, I would say. Yeah. So, I mean, we treat them fairly nicely, but then, you know, you get a lot of, you know, with belts and stuff. I mean, guitars get beat up. So, but this was getting there when I bought it, for sure.
For $900, he got a setup that could stand up to some of the heaviest and most popular hip riffs.
It turns out it's certainly, all things being even, by far my loudest guitar. I mean, I've used it for, you know, the heavier, more kind of over-the-top tunes. It really sings, but it gets dirty very quickly.
New Orleans is sinking wild and I don't want to swim.
Paul has been busy putting a new record down with the hip, but that doesn't mean his solo material is going to collect dust.
There are songs that, that I've written since then that wouldn't necessarily be fit in the hip scenario. I think it's a ways off if I did it again, but I'm putting some in the bank for sure.
Getting ready to fly solo again requires a thick skin, even if Paul's worst critic is himself.
Because of my particular scenario where I was experimenting and playing all the instruments, I just tried to shut everything out as far as any feelings of insecurity about whether this bass part is cool or that kind of thing. Because I know Johnny could play it way better on the drums, and same with Gord on the bass. And I just had to shut myself out as if I were in my own little basement. And, quite different, but sort of a nice relief for me.
Of course, when the work is done, Paul knows who he wants feedback from.
It's always nice to hear a nice comment especially from guys you work with all your life, and have that respect. I think we're good at that with each other.
Paul's bandmates are supportive of his solo experiment, the same way Langlois is supportive of Peter Loke. Messing around with lasers inspired a creative burst that could revolutionize the music industry.
It's pretty far out, right, as in terms of pickup technology. Basically what we have built is a super sensitive strain sensor that works on a guitar.
Nice guy. I had no idea he was a mad scientist at the time.
Peter Loke plays with lasers and chemical reactions for a living.
Well, is this now taking over the world? No, it's not that, actually.
Okay, so no world domination, but his experiments led this Queen's University chemistry professor to discover a racy new technology for guitar pickups.
It's pretty far out, right, as in terms of pickup technology. Basically what we have built is a super sensitive strain sensor that works on a guitar.
He started out looking for a way to measure tiny movements in bridges or airplane wings with fiber optics. But along the way, a friend proposed trying to capture the vibrations in a guitar.
At the time I had a postdoc and a graduate student in my lab, both guitar players, and I just bounced this idea off them. The next morning I walk into my office, turn on my email, and there were 2 MP3 files in the inbox, right? And then email message, yeah, here's the photonic guitar, we're going touring.
Those early beater guitars were okay to test the theory, but Peter wanted a guitar he could manipulate. He reached out to luthier Pete Swanson from Dagmar Guitars.
I found it fascinating and I understood what he was doing. The guitar vibrates, the lasers refract the light, it goes to a special box and into the amplifier, and you get the full spectrum of sound.
So basically what happens is the laser shines into the cable, finds the resonance, and then that information is been sent back. If the soundboard of the guitar moves, then the fiber optic cavity stretches or gets compressed, so the resonance frequency changes. Then every string gives you a resonance, right? Just one frequency and its overtones. And if you change the length of the string, it gives you a different frequency, a different resonance.
All of that tricky science turned into a solid sound with a lot of options. Instead of only having a few pickup locations to choose from, these allow you to have hundreds of pickups embedded in different areas of your guitar for new sounds. Peter was intrigued by the possibilities, and a few months later, Vicky was born, a custom-built guitar named after Queen Victoria, Queen's University's namesake.
In Vicky, we have a total of 7 sensors. 2 are next to the bridge. Then there are 2 a little further down and another 2 by the sound holes, and then 1 at the very bottom on the left, I guess. So each of these sensors gives you a different timbre. So some are more light and bright, and the others are more bass heavy, of course.
The fiber optics are about the size of a human hair. So he said, we want to put fiber optics all over the sound plate. I actually had a little copper wire, and I pounded the wire in along the grain so a little trough would be made. I'd lay the fiber optics down and then epoxy them in.
However, prior to embedding the fiber strands to the inside of the guitar, Peter experimented with pickup placements on the outside. This required the use of copious amounts of Scotch tape.
I told him right from the beginning, I said, do not put tape on this finish. You know, I went through the maintenance and care, and he said, Peter, I just want you to know that anything that we have in the lab is null and void of warranty, because we will hack it apart if we need to. We're doing science here. We're not playing, you know, the guitar. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, it hurt.
After getting the design down and the Scotch tape off, Peter needed a pro to try out his experiment. Lucky for him, in a crazy fluke, he met Paul Langlois, the guitarist for the Tragically HIP, when his car broke down.
It was not actually a hitchhiking experience, it was more like carjacking.
Nice guy. I had no idea he was a mad scientist at the time.
So he drove me to Queens, and I thought, he's a musician, that's a pretty nice car he's driving, right? And I asked him, so what kind of music? He goes, kind of rock music. I go, do I know your band? Yeah, I play with the Tragically HIP. And yeah, okay. I have heard about that.
From that friendly carjacking, they discovered their daughters go to school together. At a basketball game, Peter started telling Paul about his photonic pickup.
I mean, he's a chemist as well, so I just thought this, it just didn't make a lot of sense at the time. I was trying to figure it all out. So anyway, he said, you know, if you'd like to come down and check it out. Getting your head around the concept of basically that it's light, you know, that light changes when you pick a string is just, for me, that was the biggest concept to sort of accept.
But as he started to play, Paul tuned out the science and turned up the speaker.
My impression was that it was as good as a magnetic pickup, and that it was a very true sound being represented through this kind of little speaker in his lab.
Paul likes to keep his rig simple, but this new pickup makes him wonder where the gearheads could take this.
It's almost like guitar pedals, you know, it's a new sort of option. So I think if it were established that it's something different, then even traditionalists would be curious about it. I mean, there's 7 pickups in this one guitar. You would have the option of 7 different, you know, slightly different sounds because they're placed in different areas of the body. The potential there is pretty huge in especially in recording.
The sound engineer would then be able to collect this information and make this guitar sound exactly what he wants it to sound like. And that is possible with these fiber optic pickups because they're so light. So you can plaster 100 on a guitar and they won't change the sound.
Peter thinks his photonic pickup could easily be mass marketed. He just needs to scale down the beefy hardware attached to the minuscule fiber optics.
This all looks pretty complicated and stuff, but you can all fit it into a small box. The reason it is all expanded into screens and monitors and computers and this and that is only because we need to see how we can optimize the technology. And in fact, these type of sensors are already mass produced.
Not only has Peter created a new tool for the music industry, he's also figured out a few snags in his original research.
Ultimately, what I'm going to do now is I take these sensors off the guitar because we have optimized them to such a large extent, and then I'm going to use them again as chemical sensors, like we originally intended.
But he's certainly enjoying this little adventure into the guitar world.
This is a pretty wild ride for us.